How is stabbing somebody through the face stylish? And it's become because this no longer holds the respect of what this can do to another human being. It's about pretending that you are capable of meting out that kind of violence should it happen in the real world. And most people out there in this world are not. Fact, very simple. We have to ask the questions, why do soldiers who have been involved or have seen death on the battlefield, might have been their own comrades, or they've had to kill an enemy soldier? And I'm from a military family. They've had to kill an enemy soldier. They may have had to kill 5 enemy soldiers. We have to ask ourselves, in those types of circumstances, why do we see massive proliferation of post-traumatic stress? Because killing people is horrific, no matter how you do it. With a brick, with a sword, with a cruise missile, it is horrific. And we need to get away from this fantasy that killing people is cool. We've desensitized ourselves here in the West too much with TV. That's the problem.
That's what I teach. When I teach, as you know, ethical leadership, and part of ethical leadership is human nature. All of us, by nature, we are ethical. But if, as Aristotle says, we are exposed to wrong things and exposure, we become corrupted.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Our nature becomes corrupted. But then, it is not that you get used to it. You don't, because our nature is not meant, for all these things. Then you have all this traumatic, stress and all these psychological problems and so on and so on. And it's very interesting. In my team, we have also some military guys who were recently in military interactions. I don't want to just expand on that, but and there are fighters, they never talk like that. There are full contact and MMA fighters, they never talk like that. And you hear these talks only from people, oh God, what should I say? And then imagine, Bob, combine this with some racist ideas. Like, I think I told you, I don't want to mention any names or anything. It's fine. Fight somewhere because, for example, my fencing mask is black, or I have a blackish armor. Then you see the comments like, these black dragon coming from the Middle East came again to Europe. First of all, let's put it this way. I'm a German citizen. And first of all, I have been living, it doesn't matter, almost all my life abroad, be it in Germany and United States, right? But you see, mix up this attitude with racist ideas. Or let me just expand, because we are at it. Sometimes who are liberals, they don't even realize they have subconscious bias. I don't, again, mention names. I asked a HEMA instructor once, excuse me, I'm sure you should have grappling. And he said, no, we don't have grappling, we only fence. And I said, grappling is because it's a human nature. You should have grappling. And he said in Spanish, somos cristianos, no matamos. It means we are Christians, we don't kill. He tells me that.
Wow.
And he's a liberal guy. Wow. Or let me give you another liberal HEMA. We are watching, and I'm an antique analyst. I had thousands of swords in museums, not only from Persia, Ottoman empires, from China, Japan, but also from the West. Yeah. I work for museums. And then, there were Bhutanese blades, and Bhutan makes like Tibetan swords, very beautiful pattern welded steel, extremely good quality, very good. I'm sorry, I want to see, okay. And he sees them, and he is not an antique analyst. You know what he says in front of everyone, all other researchers? No match for European quality swords. They would break. And I told him, have you ever handled one European sword from that period to match the quality of a Tibetan sword? I want to see the steel. I'm not talking about the techniques. I'm talking about the steel, right?
And this is the thing I just don't understand. All swords are beautiful.
Yes, but
I love all swords.
Bob, I just want to say, the mindset behind, because then I realized, liberal or not liberal, identitarian or not all of them, but many people who are attracted to HEMA community, somehow, if they're not careful, try to idealize a word which deep in its heart, if they're not careful, we were the best, right? If you're not careful, if you're
the
not,
mythological past.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're seeing things, for example, with just a very, very briefly touch on politics, but this is a great example of it. When we look at Brexit, Britain leaving the European Union, because they appealed to the idea of a mythical British past. And people swallow that. And this is true, and it happens all the time. This idea of you sell people a mythical past, and we can get tied up in this. I look at you know some of the if you look at, for example, I was in New Zealand back in 2018. Wonderful country, and I'm fascinated by the cultures of the South Pacific because I sail. I have a yacht. I sail, and I love sailing, and I love traveling, and it's always appealed to me that the idea of what it must have been like being a 17th or 18th century sailor for the first time, experiencing the Far East. And when I look at, for example, you look at some of the indigenous weapons of the South Pacific, and look at for the Maori, for example, with the patu made of greenstone. These things, it's like, wow, this idea of somehow creating hierarchies of superiority. When you look at the tale of Hongahika, I think the Maori chief, who defeated his Maori warriors defeated a contingent of redcoats using Stone Age weaponry, effectively against muskets, and you think, well, they were using jade clubs, but they were fashioned, so they were beautifully fashioned weapons, and again, it's so at odds with the way I look at martial arts. Not in terms, and I no longer, I no longer look at them as being different or having, some having superior elements and others having, different benefits. I look at them as being parts of a human journey, and all part of just this wonderful history of who we are as a species. Not as human, but how incredible it is that we can take so many different paths and arrive at so many similar things, and the beauty found in that process, in that human thought process, that not only creates art objects, but creates systems of understanding and knowledge and transmission of knowledge, and this is so when somebody says, "Oh," and we get it on both sides. I hear people often saying, we had a funny one where, saying that katanas able to cut, will be able to cut straight through European plate armor. I think, well, a katana wasn't designed for that. If I wanted to take on European plate armor, I'd use an arquebus, or I'd use a great big polearm. But vice versa, this idea that European rapiers, Portuguese fencers in Japan in the 17th century, fighting samurai in the rapier was so much superior. I think, what's this? What's the point of this? Where's this going? Because to me,
I'm sure none of these people who talk like that are Japanese swordsmen.
No,
exactly. You see,
I don't even think they realize that they're involved, that they are actually pushing their unconscious biases. Exactly. I think it's just it almost becomes, again, it's a mythological past. This is the only way people will change.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I fully agree with you. This is very, very important to know. And I remember when I started to years ago, like 15 years ago, you know that I have been doing a BJJ for years, and then I joined a very famed BJJ club, and the instructor was really not good at all. He couldn't control. So people were really basically in sparring, were hurting each other in chokes, in arms bar, and all these things. But the first competition we took part, all of us realized competing in competition was much easier than sparring in our club. Yeah. Do you know what it means, Bob? It means we were doing, not because of us, but because of our instructor, he was not taking care of his club. But then later on, when I went and then saw many people train for really high level competitions, right? You see that they didn't train like that because they didn't want to get hurt. They were, you know,
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah, but I, you know, there is that old saying that train as you would fight and fight as you would train. You know, I think, but again, I think that there are certain fields where that's perfectly acceptable. I think when we talk about fighting, where weapons are involved, is a very different thing to practice. And I no longer look, for example, I no longer look at fencing in a bout or fencing in a tournament as even as a bout. I look at it as practice. It's an exercise.
It is an exercise.
It's an exercise. A fight, when people talk about fighting, and again, it's a phenomenon I've come across. When people talk about fighting, as in, you know, I've spent 5 years, you know, learning how to use a longsword, and I reckon I could handle myself in a fight using a wooden stick. The problem with fights is that fights contain so many unpredictable elements and variables. Because if it's a fight, what's to say that 3 of the guy's friends are going to turn up at your side when you least expect it? And so this idea of fighting and participating in a recreational sport, 2 very, very different things. And again, I think at the heart of it, we need to be honest. I think the HEMA community needs to be honest about what it's doing. You know, we're recreating at best a dead art. But this doesn't make us fighters, and in many respects, it doesn't make us fighters. But I think the analogy I've used before is it's almost like me saying I like to go out and do some paintball or some airsoft. I think I'd have a really great time in a war zone because I'd be perfectly equipped at that point to, you know, all I need to do is this. Because I do 2 hours of airsoft a week, that does not make me an infantry soldier. And it's the same in HEMA. You do 2 hours of swordplay a week, does not make you a medieval soldier, does not make you a killer. And we need to remember that.
Just to finish the second part of our interview, I think we talked about it. It reminds me of what Alberto Balasso said many years ago. I know many people are going to hate me for saying that. He said many people who come here and claim they're fighters, they should go and fight MMA, full contact, Kyokushin, boxing, Muay Thai. This is real fight. They can go and fight there. They have no reason to be here. If they're here, they need to fight with techniques. And that's the whole, if you want to have a real fight, go to real full contact martial arts. You go MMA, Kyokushin, boxing, Muay Thai. That's what he said. And I really liked what Alberto said. Absolutely. Yep. Because then it again comes and ends, and he said they don't do that because they don't dare. So they come here and they play all these tough things and then they get hurt, right? Or they hurt
and I hope it doesn't. But I made a prediction 5 years ago, said unless the attitudes change within the historical fencing community, this idea of being able to hit however hard you like with no consideration, because, you know, I made a prediction. I said if this trend, if this attitude continues, somebody will die within 5 years. Hasn't happened. So I think people maybe are taking notice. Yeah. But I have been talking about this now for a good few years, and the few people I've been able to sit down with in a lecture or on a podcast or something like that and been able to share my thoughts with, the reception's been pretty good. I know that there will be some people out there who'll say, how many tournaments has this guy won?
Oh God.
And generally, I will say that the people who would say that, I'll say, I would say to them, the chances are when I started fencing, you weren't born. So, I don't take titles. I've never appended a title to myself. I don't refer to myself as a master or a maestro or anything like that, because I did not create this art. I simply read old books. I turn illustrations and translations into movements and concepts. I didn't add anything to this art, and I certainly haven't fought anybody with a sharp sword. So no, I'm a conduit. I'm probably the next best thing to a time machine you'll get, but I am not a master of swordsmanship or anything. I'm an expert in the subject.
Okay, so thanks for the second part of our interview. The third part of our interview is going to be about the beautiful part. I mean, all of them were, but I'm very interested in, is about your book. Can you tell us about your upcoming book, please? You have written.
It's been utter torture. It's been in concept for a long time. And I think related to the last thing I said, I don't think there's anybody, not only in historical fencing, but in any martial art, who hasn't suffered from imposter syndrome at some point and thought, do I really know as much as I think I know? Am I right? And for that reason, I have held off writing anything more than an article. Certainly not any, I would never previously have considered writing any instructional material, even after 15 years in this field. I'm now coming up to 26 years in this field, and I'm finally comfortable with writing down some of what I know. So the Mesa book has been in an embryonic form for quite some time, and the big challenge was really to understand, to work out what I wanted it to be, because obviously when we look at books related to historical European martial arts, we generally find that the majority of books out there are reprints of translations of transcriptions of medieval manuscripts. There are a few instructional manuscripts out there. There are some very good, some okay, a couple that I would think maybe I would have told my students maybe not best to spend your money on that, but thankfully not many of those. But the Mesa book, what I wanted to do was not just simply provide a translation and just repeat old work. I wanted to create a syllabus and a methodology drawn from contemporaneous sources that would, because Mesa, by its nature, being a peasant art, a peasant weapon, especially early Mesa, there are various sources, but they're not necessarily immediately identifiable in terms of relation to one another. It's only by the time we get a Lekushna that things become systemized, and we start to see things really becoming what we could consider to be models. So what I wanted to do was take what I've long said as the holy trinity of early Mesa work, 3 manuscripts that are all contemporaneous, which have a degree of crossover. They're from a similar geographical region in southern Germany, round the Nuremberg area. And what I wanted to do was take the players from those manuscripts and rearrange them into a system, methodology, syllabus that anybody can pick up the book, read it, understand it, and have a series of exercises that they can work through sequentially that will teach them to fight from the most natural position, or from the most natural environment you can enter, where you can fence from, which is where you start at a pre-arranged measure where people are comfortable. And so I prefer to teach people to fight from the outside in. from the bit where they're most comfortable, which is generally when nobody can hit them, to the point actually where they can lay their hands on one another. And that's what we've got. So the set about finally pulling it all together at the beginning of this year, hundreds of pages of notes, and trying to organize it all. It's been a real marathon to get to this point, but I'm glad to say I am self-publishing it through Amazon, and we're looking at a publication date of no later than June this year. So it will contain, obviously, some. It's not a history. It's not going to be a book full of history lessons. Will contain some history, some relevant history, to give you an understanding, or to give the reader an understanding of where this art comes from. It will give some very detailed fundamentals, and it will comprise mainly of 25 lessons, all set out. Each lesson contains, it's fully illustrated. Each lesson contains a hyperlink to a video where you can watch the whole play in front of it being played out. So you can not only read the instructions in the book, but you can watch the video alongside it to see it in action.
Is it an ebook or is it a hard copy?
So I'm doing an electronic version for those who purely want an electronic version, and I'm doing a print version with the free electronic version attached to it.
Okay.
So either so you can buy the hard. So it's not going to be a hardback. It's going to be a large softback format. So you can buy the. You could get the printed version. It will come with the free electronic version, and the free electronic version. The electronic version, you can buy that on its own. If you just wish to have the electronic version, that will and they will come with a hyperlink to the video content for each lesson. Okay. So maximizing the use of modern technology to make a very old system of fencing come to life.
Okay, just one more question I have. When I went to Ukraine in arms and armor academic conferences, I mean, these were academic conferences, not fighting, and most of our colleagues there talk about the kind of weapon which they call cord. Have you heard of that? Cord, they call it.
I haven't, no.
No? And no. I'm not so sure if they talk about messer, which they call cord all the time.
Oh, right, okay.
And then they say it's a peasant weapon, and it looks like messer.
Oh, right, okay.
They always called it cord. Have you heard of that?
I haven't. No, I'm going to have a look into that because that's interesting. I know that there are certainly related types of blades that are found. For example, dusak, which is found in kind of Czech, Bohemia kind of region. You also have sort of the Messer extend out into Hungary. Then you get the likes of the Shashka from Russia.
Cord, they call it cord. It looks like Messer short, and tons of articles on that.
That's fascinating. I'm going to certainly have to have a look at that.
Yes, it's something which you might find interesting.
I will ask. I will try to find a friendly Ukrainian who will be able to give me an insight with any luck. But I'll let you know. I'll let you know.
Okay, Bob. It was really a pleasure having you here. Do you want to add anything to our discussion?
I think just because obviously we haven't seen each other for a long time, I think we just have to relate to your audience the incident in which we got lost in Malta.
Yes, please tell us. That's beautiful, right?
So we had been out for a night, hadn't we? And we had a few drinks, and we ended up, Manisha and I, trying to find our way back to the hotel. Well, anybody who's been in Valletta will know that this city is a rabbit warren of stairs and a maze of alleyways, and we ended up on the opposite side of the island to where we should have been. Walked into a wedding reception in a hotel. Walked into a wedding reception, pretended we were guests, so we could order a taxi. But that is one of the funny. it maybe doesn't sound too much in the retelling of it, but it was one of the funniest nights out I've ever had in my life. Because
the side of the bride thought we come from the groom's side, and the groom thought we come from the bride's side.
We had no idea where we are or how we got there. Just that we walked in what seemed like the right direction and ended up entirely on the wrong side of the island from where we should have been, which was So, but we've had so many fun times. So the gala dinners have always been, where the 20-course gala dinners always provided some amusement. Where we found that we kind of were asking after, the fourth or fifth course had come out. My God, is there more food coming?
I remember.
But I'm looking forward to seeing you in person again, and
sure,
we can do that soon.
Sure. But, sure. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on, and everybody out there, especially those who are serving, and I can't say that. I'll start again. Thanks for having me. Everybody out there, stay safe. Those who are serving, thank you. Stay safe, and I hope to see some of you at some point, somewhere, messer in hand, and a drink, and
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.